is a Washington-based award-winning journalist currently incarcerated at the Washington Correction Center. He is serving a 45-year prison sentence for taking another human's life during a drug robbery, something he takes full accountability for. He has been incarcerated since 2003. Did I say? Yes, award-winning journalist. Y'all give it up for Chris Blackwell. Dorsey Nunn began advocating for the rights of California prisoners and their families while incarcerated. As co-director of Legal Services for Prisoners with Children in 2003, he co-founded All of Us Are None, a grassroots movement of formerly incarcerated people working on their own behalf to secure their civil and human rights. All of Us Are None is now the policy and advocacy arm of Legal Services for Prisoners with Children, which Nunn did lead as the executive director since 2011. Collective victories include ending indefinite solitary confinement in California, expanding access to housing and employment for formerly incarcerated people, and restoring the vote to those on parole and probation. He's also the author of a now banned book by the CDCR, so he's really my hero now. And Dr. Terry Kupers, a psychiatrist and expert on correctional mental health and the detrimental effects of solitary confinement. He is known for his expertise in the fields of psychoanalytic psychotherapy, forensic psychiatry, and community mental health. He is professor emeritus at the Wright Institute in Berkeley, California, and co-author of the book that we are talking about tonight. All of these are co-authors of the book we are talking about tonight. Ending Isolation, the Case Against Solitary Confinement. Please welcome. So this is going to be a conversation. This is how it's going to go. Each of our panelists is going to give a 3 to 5 minute introduction, opening remarks. You started to hear some of Mr. Blackwell's a few minutes ago. And then we've got a video, a pre-recorded video from the esteemed, needs no introduction or bio, Angela Davis. And then we're going to engage in a conversation, right? So I'm gonna pull on some threads that you all bring up in your opening, but it's a conversation. So if I ask Dorsey something, Dr. Kupers, feel free to interject, and vice versa. I promise you that at the end of the evening, we will answer some of y'all's questions. Just give us a second. They're gonna be handing out 3x5 cards. You write your questions down there, and Jose or other people will bring them up to me, and we'll do that at the end of the evening. Sound cool? Great. Deborah, your opening remarks, please. Look, I started with it too.
Okay, thank you so much, Pat. And hello, everyone. I'm Debbie Zalesne. I'm one of the co-authors of the book, Ending Isolation, the Case Against Solitary Confinement. I teach at CUNY Law School. Okay, I have to pick it. Oh, there we go. That's better. Oh, is that better? Yes. Closer? Yes. Closer? Okay. I'm eating into my 3 to 5 minutes. Today's panel is about one of the most extreme and least understood practices in the American carceral system. And, you know, as you will hear the whole night, solitary confinement is torture. I want to tell you a little bit about the book and how it came to be and how we make the case that solitary confinement is torture. I started co-writing the book with Chris Blackwell, our other panelist, who wanted to originally write a memoir about his time spent in solitary. And he took, the last time he was in solitary confinement, he took meticulous notes, and he wrote a very long story about his time, things that he observed, things that happened to him. And it's an extraordinary story, and he asked me to co-author the book with him, and I was thrilled, of course. But he always insisted that, he's an extraordinary writer, Chris, and he's an extraordinary thinker, an extraordinary human being. And I thought, wow, this guy is so cool, you know, and he spent all this time in solitary confinement. It was sort of shocking. I didn't have a lot of experience with the carceral system at all, let alone solitary at this time. And he always insisted, you know, I'm not unique, I'm not extraordinary, you know, and he kind of insisted that we hear from other people as well, to humanize people in solitary confinement and people, incarcerated people in general. He said, I'm not extraordinary. There's so many people in prisons, in solitary confinement, who are just like me. People who committed their crimes when they were very young, people who got in fights, people who did, you know, whatever they did to get in solitary. But actually, you have to demonize someone in order to justify thinking that they belong in solitary confinement. And so when you demonize people, you as Terry always says, put them away and throw away the key. Put them in solitary and throw away the key. Lock them up and throw away the key. But what we wanted to do, and driven by Chris and his story, we wanted to humanize people who are incarcerated, and in particular people who go to solitary confinement. One of the first things I learned doing this work is that the vast majority of people in solitary confinement are not violent people, are not there. I mean, maybe they committed violent crimes at one point, but they are not in solitary because they did something violent. The vast majority. It's almost never true. People go to solitary for all sorts of reasons, most typically for minor infractions. They wore their baseball hat backwards. They were wearing non-prison issued socks. Usually it's a pretext for something else that guards want to, they want to control the person because of something they're doing. Oftentimes it's for their journalism or for the way they've spoken out, things that Kat talked about. So sometimes it's for no infraction at all. People are sent to solitary confinement for they're on suicide watch, or because they have a mental illness, or because they're just under investigation and they're there for months just to find out they didn't do what they're under investigation for. So the purpose of our book was to humanize, and we tell Chris's story, but we also have about 35 to 40 other contributors who spent substantial time in solitary confinement. Some of them spent decades in solitary confinement. And then, of course, we brought on Terry for all of his vast experience and knowledge about the harms of solitary confinement. And we end up making the case that solitary confinement should be cruel and unusual punishment in violation of the 8th Amendment in every instance. Is that close enough? In every instance. We talk about all sorts of, we have stories in the book of all sorts of crimes committed against people in solitary, like physical, violent assaults against people in solitary, and there's all kinds of deprivation of human rights, deprivation of water, toilet paper, tampons, all the awful things, heat, cold, making awful conditions. But the bottom line is the isolation itself, in every instance, is the case that we make, in every instance, is cruel and unusual punishment. And so we make that case by facts and figures and research and a lot of the medical research that Terry has done and others, but we support these facts and figures with stories and with, real people telling real stories about what happened to them. And the stories are shocking. I'm probably not doing so that's a little bit about the book. Thank you so much for coming. This is a tremendous honor for me and super exciting. And thank you. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you for taking the time to be here today. I am honored to share this time with you. My name is Chris Blackwell. I'm a journalist, activist, and storyteller. And I'm also incarcerated. I'm here with you today to share a book I was blessed to create with many of my close friends and colleagues. It centers on a topic that is very close to my heart, a topic that has etched itself deep within my being. Today we are going to talk about solitary confinement, the role it's played in my life, and the many other people who've been in contact with it through the carceral system. Ending isolation, the Case Against Solitary Confinement, is a tool to help educate people on what's going on in prisons across the nation and a path to help us see and take action to end this horrific practice. We see this book as a tool for our movement, a way to learn about solitary confinement to help us better understand its history and the harm it causes those forced to experience it. But most importantly, we see the book as a tool to humanize our brothers and sisters who've been in it, or still remain in solitary confinement today. One of the biggest questions when you write a book is, what inspired you to write this book? I often think about how to answer that question. And the interesting thing is, that answer always changes. I could say it was because I experienced solitary for the first time at the age of 12 years old, where I was left hogtied and stripped down to my boxers on a cold concrete cell floor for hours until my spirit was broken down and I was finally untied and given back my proper clothing. Or I could say it was because of the dozen times I've been sent to solitary confinement since that very first time throughout my almost 30 years of incarceration to date. But for me, what comes up most is how I've seen it used to oppress and abuse millions of incarcerated people who have been forced to experience it. Like Sid, an elder I knew who lost his life when he was sent to solitary confinement during COVID. He wasn't offered medical treatment in his 70s after contracting a deadly virus, but instead drug off to a cold, isolated cell for his and others' protections, quote unquote. Within 24 hours, he had passed, just like many others inside prison during those times. Or it could be for the many friends I've known who've lost their lives to suicide in those lonely moments, where all they had to explore were the darkest corners of their minds and the concrete walls that surround them. This recently happened with a close friend of mine who was forced to self-medicate due to severe pain he was experiencing with stage 4 cancer. He was sent to solitary in a wheelchair for using drugs that helped him pull through the extreme pain he was forced to endure every day because DOC refused to give him the proper treatment and care for his cancer. And it's impossible to forget the young men I've seen placed in solitary confinement because prison guards have no clue how to manage them. So they harm and abuse them through the barbaric use of solitary confinement and the pain it causes. The more I began to learn about solitary confinement, I know, funny I could actually learn more. The more I knew it was impossible not to write a book about it. Like when my dear friend and co-author Quinette Harris, an incarcerated journalist in Texas, who just spent almost 9 consecutive years in solitary confinement for her quote-unquote celebrity status. When she told me about the many hardships women face in solitary confinement, it blew my mind. Hardships I had never even thought of, like being forced to provide sexual acts or favors for things as simple as toilet paper, or pads when they were experiencing their menstrual cycle. And just the trauma she provides are endless. What was happening to her and other women made me sick to my stomach. And let's not forget the massive amount of trauma and PTSD that's created for those forced to experience solitary confinement to unrelenting grasp. These are burdens incarcerated people are forced to live with for their entire lives. Many of us wear like a backpack full of lead, unable to lift from our backs. We just carry it around with no ability to shake it off. We are meant to believe we deserve this for the harm we caused in our communities. But is that really true? And whether you think someone should be in prison or not, do you think we should torture our fellow humans? In that something as a society we want to condone? I don't. And that is why I wanted to create this project with my fellow incarcerated community, our allies, and the many experts who understand the harm taking place in solitary confinement. People who are all brave enough to call it what it is, a racist, harmful, abusive practice we should have abandoned over 200 years ago when it started. So, I encourage all of you who hear our message or read our words in the book to stand up, be brave, and demand we stop harming and abusing our fellow humans. We know this is wrong, and we know we can do better as a society. It's time we stop sitting by and acting like there's nothing we can do about it. Because there is something we can do. We can collectively build movements that refuse to be silenced. We can empower the most impacted voices to share their stories and humanize. We can demand something happen and refuse to be silenced until it does. We can humanize our fellow humans. Because when we humanize something, it becomes very difficult to demonize it. We can be better because we are better. I want to thank all of you for your time today. I hope the book and the many parts of our movement help you better understand what is happening inside prisons and other places of confinement. And most important, that it encourages you to take action and join our movement. Because it will take all of us to make it stop.
That is the voice of Chris Blackwell. He's incarcerated in Washington State. He will be joining us by phone. Note, he can only be on the phone for 20 minutes at a time, so there will be some hanging up and calling back. I think most of us in this room are familiar with this practice. All right. Dorothy Nunn, your opening remarks, sir.
Well, I was thinking about, how did I wind up here? I wind up here because some of the people they put in the hole was the very people that taught me how to read. Some of the people that they put in the hole was the very people that they taught me how to write. And I can remember how important it was for them to do that, and in part they changed the trajectory of my life. I can remember when we did a survey at Legal Services for Prisons for Children of Cochran Prison and the prison at Pelican Bay, and we was only asking people how long it was that they hadn't seen their families. All of the information that started coming in was information that just knocked me down. The information was, I've been in the hole for 10 years. I've been in the hole for 20 years. Some of them have been in the hole for 25 years. That's solitary confinement. I can remember riding up there with Carol Strickland going to Pelican Bay when they went on the hunger strike. And I didn't think that prisoners from all races could organize themselves in a collective body to do some resistance, because that's not the period of time that I went through in prison. So I went there to ask my homies, was it true? And what I seen was my homeboy came out when we was walking the yard in 72. He was as dark as I was. What I am now. When he came out of Pelican Bay, he had lost all of his skin color. I'm a big ass crybaby. I thought that he had went home. and he had. What he told me, and what the interviews that we did that day, one of the questions was, in the event that this doesn't go right, who do you want us to notify of your next of kin? That was one of the questions that we had to ask. The question that I wanted to ask was, hey man, y'all gonna trust each other to do this? The other thing that I thought was peculiar, every person that I interviewed that day told me about Bobby Sands, an Irish Republican Army member, which meant that even though they were isolated, that somehow they were communicating in a real way. And by the way, when I learned how to read, they also made me make a promise. The promise was to return to the community an asset instead of a liability. That's the price of my education. That's the price of my commitment. On October 22nd, I will be out of prison 44 years. If you count the 6 years that I've been organizing in prison, that meant that I've been at this, and I've had no other job other than fighting for the full restoration of human and civil rights for 50 years. Just another thing I just got to tell you. Kat, I love you so much because you're knowledgeable. I didn't know that many people knew that they built solitary confinement for black people. When they start talking about the worst of the worst, and we hear George, Trump, all the rest of them. When they built Pelican Bay, they said that who they were going to put in was the worst of the worst. It qualified black people in a particular way because when they were measuring the population of prisons, it's about every 100,000. We're 9 times more likely than a white guy to be there. We're 3 times more likely than a Latino to be there. So at a certain point, the worst of the worst was me and my children. So at a certain point, my homeboy was PJ that went to visit that day. Probably one of the greatest things that I ever did was that after the case was won, the thing that I helped orchestrate was his release, and he's on the street now. So at a certain point, they can't tell me about the hole, they can't tell me about torture, because they did it to me. And for all the people who was doing prison organizing when I was there in '72, they were the ones that bore the blunt of what they were doing. So for those people to educate me, they sacrificed some shit. They sacrificed probably the rest of their work life, and most of them is going to go hungry, not necessarily be fed when they was out there, because the same degree of oppression that they had when they was in prison. They've been denied housing, the right to have licenses to do work, and they're too old to work. So that's my reality. My reality is they locked up so many of my homeboys. They were just like me. We hadn't even started shaving. So if you go in at 23, my homeboy got out 3 weeks ago, he's 74. My other homeboys that's getting out, they didn't put in 30 years in the hole, 20 years in the hole. Their girlfriend ain't girlfriends no more, they're grandmothers.
It's unfathomable. I've learned in my older organizing years the importance of breath. And so I just want to invite people to take a breath. Thank you for your vulnerability, Percy. I love you right back. It's not my brand, but I'm a big ass crybaby too. I do want to say this, I want to say one thing. So on my mother's side, believe it or not, Irish Jews from Belfast, Ireland, the IRA side. And so, go figure. And so I took my daughter to Belfast a couple years ago. And for folks who don't know or haven't been there, on our side, the revolutionary side, there's a wall, big wall. And on that wall are paintings of Angela Davis and Field Marshal George Jackson and the Black Panther Party. And I popped my collar a little bit because our driver was a former IRA brother dude and he knew about APTP and the solidarity between the IRA and Black freedom fighters. If you don't know, you should get to go DuckDuckGo, no Google. And check it out. It was for me. I had no idea about the importance of your movement there. So thank you, Dorsey, for 50 years of serving our people. Scripts are made to be rewritten, so we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it as we do it tonight. Dr. Terry Kupers, your opening statement, please.
You know, when you struggle to change what's terribly wrong with our prisons, you meet some of the most beautiful, compassionate, soulful people in the world. And you're seeing some of that. What goes on in prison is invisible to the public. Lock them up and throw away the key. Any expose of the horrors of prison life is welcome. But with our book, Ending Isolation, and with the Journey to Justice bus tour, we have prisoner journalists doing the exposing, and that's extremely powerful. As Dorsey Nunn says in his book, What Kind of Bird Can't Fly, discussing a poem by Bertolt Brecht, only the downtrodden and enslaved can break their own shackles by rising up together. In this historical moment, with a fast emerging police state that is so critical, I'm very honored to have the opportunity to help prisoners and formerly incarcerated folks get their message out there. We have a chapter, Who Goes to the Hole? Prison authorities say it's the worst of the worst. That could not be further from the truth. I'm a forensic psychiatrist. In preparation for expert testimony in court, I've interviewed and examined over 1,000 prisoners. When I go into solitary confinement units, I meet people who, on average, are thoughtful and compassionate, who have educated themselves in prison after dropping out of school in the community. They are disproportionately Black, brown, and Native American. As teens, they broke laws, maybe committed an act of violence that they will forever regret. Then in prison, they matured. I meet them in their 30s or 40s or 50s in solitary confinement, and they tell me they messed up as a much younger person. Some are bitter and mean, just like some of us out here are bitter and mean. But the large majority are not. They are very bright. They've read philosophy and political theory, and their analysis of what's very wrong with social arrangements is very similar to mine, only more poignant because it's written out of a lot of pain. They are very far from the worst of the worst. Authoritarians always need to vilify and dehumanize the people they want to cage and torture. That's how it works. Think Trump, claiming that all Mexican immigrants are rapists and murderers. The very same kind of lies are used to caricature the worst of the worst, who they throw into isolation and torture. And solitary confinement is torture, plain and simple. The psychiatric symptoms and disabilities of occupants of solitary confinement units: huge anxiety, thinking problems, paranoia, despair. The suicide rate is off the charts in solitary confinement. It's 60% of all suicides in prison. And what I do is I go to court and I report the symptoms and disabilities I find when I interview people. And then it's up to the judge or the jury to decide whether that's torture, or in the United States courts, it's whether it's an Eighth Amendment violation, the ban against cruel and unusual punishment. But there's another way that solitary confinement constitutes torture. Torturers utilize solitary confinement while they are torturing people. Think about it. The victim is brought from a solitary cell, is tortured, and then is returned to a solitary cell. The reason? The torturer keeps them in isolation, so the torturer is the only human being in their life. And that is designed to break people, to make them more compliant. The effects of both uses of solitary confinement are the same. This means we as a society are doing to prisoners precisely what the torturer is doing to his victim, isolating and mistreating them until their mind is destroyed so they will be more compliant. That's the whole purpose. The torturer is happy with that result. A compliant victim makes his job easier. But should society be happy that hundreds of thousands of prisoners will have their minds and bodies greatly damaged by solitary confinement? Solitary is the main obstacle to successful rehabilitation in our prisons today. Of course, we need radical decarceration. Send people home. That's the point of the abolition movement. But before we get very far in that ultimate struggle, we can end the torture of solitary confinement.
Thank you, Dr. Kupers. Okay, now we are going to hear a few words from lifelong freedom fighter Angela Davis.
Good evening. It is indeed an honor to participate, albeit remotely, in this event which celebrates the publication of Ending Isolation, the Case Against Solitary Confinement. Now, first of all, I want to applaud all of the authors and contributors to this book. And I want to recognize that this important volume is the result of a collaboration of anti-prison activists both inside and outside. So let me thank Chris Blackwell, Deborah Zalesne, Juanita Harris, and Terry Kupers, whom I have known and with whom I have worked and struggled for more than 50 years. As brilliant as all of these individuals, all the individuals whom I've named may be, the heart and soul of this book comes from all those who, like Chris Blackwell and Juanita Harris, have lived experiences of solitary confinement and of all of the conditions of imprisonment that are similar to and that constitute the breeding ground for carceral isolation. And of course, I send greetings to the phenomenal Cat Brooks. This is an important moment to renew the fight against isolation, given the current intensification of social and economic conditions that glorify the rich and further demonize the poor. It is more apparent today than ever that carceral approaches dominate our social institutions, from public schooling to ICE. We see declining resources for education, but massive increased funding for ICE. ICE agents terrorize our communities, and ICE detention facilities are popping up everywhere. At every level, we see more and more police and more and harsher prisons. This is precisely the game plan for fascism. And of course, it is also all about race. Fascism thrives on racism. The prison system evolved out of slavery. Black people and people of color are always hit with the most severe repression inside and outside jails and prisons. It is not accidental that the systematic dismantling of the gains of the mid-20th century freedom movement is happening precisely at the same time as the prison population explodes and as ever larger numbers of people in prison are being thrown into long-term solitary confinement. Solitary confinement is torture. It combines violence against the body with violence against the mind, soul, and spirit of human beings. By design, its shadow looms over the carceral state. It is the slow death that demonstrates that capital punishment is at the very heart of the prison system in the United States. The book, Ending Isolation, paints a poignant picture of life in solitary through the voices of those who are experiencing this dreaded punishment. They tell their own stories, even as they know that they risk harsh retaliation. People who are in prison or who have been in prison are the experts on their own experiences. We need to listen to them. And they also have expertise on what is happening in this so-called free world. So tell all of your friends about the book, Ending Isolation, the Case Against Solitary Confinement. And please support the Journey to Justice bus and book tour.
Okay, we're gonna get into conversation in a second, but a couple of things first. First, I'm a theater baby. I'm old enough to remember we did not seat people late. So I feel a way about the old rules of theater. I'm gonna ask folks, just like we're in the theater, if you can turn off or put on silent, not buzzing, anything that makes noise, watches, phones, whatever. Solitary confinement is extreme torture, but there's no such thing as a working or human or reformed or better cage, right? What's the call?
Free all.
What's the call?
Free all.
What's the call?
Free all.
All right, I just want to make sure we all start from the same place. We've heard the name Quanetta Harris a few times now. We did not get to have her on the phone, Dr. Kupers, when you and I spoke the other day, and she's not able to be with us now. So I actually, Deborah, would like it if we could start this conversation by you bringing Quanetta into the room.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Quanetta would love to be here, of course. There's a rule that she can't be, an incarcerated person can't be on the phone with another incarcerated person, ever. So, that's that. We are so privileged to have worked with Quanetta. I know Quanetta really well. She is extraordinary. She's an amazing writer. She's a journalist. I mean, look her up. She is extraordinary. She brought a perspective to this issue that you don't hear that much about, usually, a woman's perspective. And what happens in women's prisons is vastly different in a lot of ways from what happens in men's prisons. The starting point that she talks about all the time is everything is transactional. When you're a woman in solitary confinement and you're watched over by male guards, everything is transactional. She's in Texas. It gets to 110 degrees, 120 degrees. First of all, they need to take some clothing off and strip down a little bit, and that's a disaster as a starting point. You want a bottle of water? What are you going to do for it? Show me something for it. Everything is transactional. You want tampons? What are you going to do for it? So that's one of the things she talks a lot about. And we have a bunch of women in our who've contributed to our book as well, and everyone tells the same types of stories, the things that go on for women. A lot of it has to do with, first of all, also in general population, solitary confinement is used as a threat, and this is true for all genders or whatever. It's used as a threat. If you don't give in to what they're asking for, you're sent to solitary. But for women, it's sexual assault. If you resist rape, you're sent to solitary. If you don't resist and you are sexually assaulted, wait for it, you can be sent to solitary for having an inappropriate relationship after being raped by a male guard, or any guard. So she really, the bottom line is she brought a perspective that you don't hear that much about. I mean, prisons are, we hear about men's violence in men's prisons and men being violent with women. And also, Quanetta also talks about, there aren't really gangs in her prison, she says. I don't know if that's 100% true or not, but there's not, the violence is not the same. There might be fights, but it's not about violence. So women are sent to solitary, and it's almost never for violent behavior. So it's very different. And she is a brilliant writer. I can't wait for you to read her stories in our book. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. I mean, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring up these stories about what women experience in prisons is probably bringing a little clearer for some of us in the Bay Area. We've been listening to the horror stories coming out of FCI Dublin for the last couple of years, where the consequence for telling the truth for a lot of those women was to be scattered like the wind all over this country and further away from their families, and now they want to turn that facility into an ICE detention center. Do we have Chris on the phone? Josh? Josh was our tech dude. 1 second. Okay, he'll signal with me when we do. Dr. Kupers, I want to ask you now, and you and I did talk about this the other day, but I think it bears repeating because something that I've both heard you talk about and also read is the actual physiological changes to the brain that happen when you are put in solitary confinement. And I think particularly the things that we're understanding more and more these days about neural pathways, right? The way both they can be devastated and rebuilt. The impacts. Yeah.
Yes, the reason I started studying brain changes in solitary confinement is because in court, the court requires physical damage to recover violations of the Eighth Amendment. So I said, well, that's not difficult because it ruins the brain of the people inside. That's physical. And it's true, we have PET scans, photon emission tomography, functional MRIs, other tests, and there are actual changes. Very simply, the limbic system, which is beneath the temple, is the active part of the brain when we're having strong emotions, anger, hatred, fear, and the prefrontal cortex, which is basically above the eyes and the forehead, is where we have judgment, executive function, cognitive ability. What happens in solitary confinement is that the limbic system overreacts. It becomes the source of much of the behavior that one is experiencing. While the cognitive function, I mentioned that one of the symptoms, and this is a very troublesome symptom, is that people in solitary cannot concentrate and lose their memory. That's the tendency. So I ask people, why don't you read? And they say, I can't remember what I read the page before. What's happening is the prefrontal cortex is shrinking. The limbic system underneath the temple and the source of anger is expanding, and that's why we have the anxiety and agitation. It's also why the damage from solitary is long-lasting, because when you make those changes in the brain, then you release the person from solitary. Their brain doesn't go back to working the way it used to. And if I can add a point to that, I'm so impressed by all of the people I know, many of whom are here tonight, who come out of solitary totally together and committed to changing the awful priorities and inequities in our society. They are heroes. It's too often the case that people come out of solitary and they're just done. They retreat into their home and become depressed. They won't interact. And so we have to think about what we're trying to do in prison. Do we want to train people to be compliant, to get out of prison and not be able to have agency or initiative? Or is there something radically different that we need to do?
So you can do what I train my clients to do, and you can not answer my question and say what you want to say. But I was gonna, because that's something actually that's always sat with me. This sort of wonder at talking to my elders that did do 10, 20, 30, 40 years in solitary. They're able to be in communication with me to continue being freedom fighters. And one of the things, what I want to talk about, Darcy, one of the things that I've come to understand is that folks develop strategies with which to survive those minutes, hours, days, months, years. And if you could talk a bit about that, either from lived experience or conversations you have with your comrades, like how do folks endure?
Push-ups.
Facts.
A lot of push-ups. Thinking what's ahead of you. It's like, I was in a hole for a year. You know, the thing that stuck out the most, the thing that kept me alive, I think, in part, was thinking about my kids. You know, because I had a life sentence, and I was thinking that they were going to be the ones that was going to be alive if I got out.
Or something, yeah.
That's Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
One of the things that stands out for me, because when you was talking, and sometimes like, when I go so high, I miss some stuff. But the other reality of it is that I don't know if everybody can even identify, but not ever being touched any other way but suspiciously, violently, at all. So at the year of being only touched suspiciously and violently, when somebody hugged me, I didn't necessarily have control of my body. It was almost like having a mini orgasm without the whole thing. You know, I was shaking. So I don't know what damage did they do. And this person was just having a platonic relationship with me, just to be touched in a kind way. You know, other things that I did, you know, I don't know if y'all ever had a phone system, and it's not a real phone system. It's like talking to your neighbor through the toilet stool. Flush it, hey, how you doing, old boy? You know, it was like, you know, that's how I knew they was communicating. That's how I knew they got to, you know. It wasn't like people were sending emails. And by the way, y'all surely don't know that when after they killed George, the Attica Rebellion was based on the Folsom Manifesto. We didn't even have text messaging and all this other stuff, and we were still communicating. So it's like, you know, to survive that stuff, I also thought about the suicide part of it. At one point, my fantasy was, I didn't mind dying as long as I could take out some police. You know, I felt like that was a good way to go, as opposed to walking off all this time. You know, and that kept me alive for it. Like what you see right now is 189 pounds. What you didn't see was 230. And you didn't see 31. And by the way, the other thing that I need to say is that sometimes when you're getting tortured and you're living in fear, you could be traveling automatically. So I couldn't stand for anybody to walk behind me. I couldn't stand for them to actually walk up and touch me. I would automatically go into a position of defending myself. So it's like, you know, how do you survive? What drove me was fear, made me muscle up. I had to learn that later to admit that was fear driving me. You know, the survival instincts. You know, so like, that was stuff that got me through. And what I don't know is how my homies got through. It's the only thing they were doing was organizing and making us make promises to come back to the community with a purpose.
I'm hoping that you heard what Joyce was just talking about. If you wanted to expand upon that, you're welcome The question that I've been holding on for you.
Yeah.
Yes, and then maybe the second piece that I wanted to ask you about, that I think we talked about brilliantly, is the rate that the state sells us the lie that cages bring us safety, right? We end up selling our souls for the illusion of safety. And if you could talk about the nonsensical fallacy that solitary confinement makes anybody any safer.
Thank you, Kat. I appreciate you, man. I appreciate everybody here. And Dorothy, man, I have heard it all, and it really feels good, brother, to listen to you, man, speak this truth, because people don't get to hear this truth. And you said the word so many times, survive. It's that moment. That's all you have in solitary, survive. And some people can't, right? You mentally deteriorate to a point to where you can't survive as a human. You can't thrive. You have no hope. You have nothing to look forward to. You know, you gotta think a lot of people sitting in solitary are sitting in there with nothing. I used to remind myself when I was sitting in there, I got somebody to call. I got someone sending me books. I know someone out there loves me. I know they're thinking about me right now. And I know if something happens, they're going to act up for me. But you know how many people ain't got nobody to act up for them? And the brother said something else that sparked this. The reason why I wrote the book the last time was because of a young man that's 19 and a half years old. His name was Malcolm. And he was sitting in the hole, and I was watching how the police were treating him. He had been in the hole for 11 and a half months at that time. He was in the hole because they couldn't maintain this young man's behavior. They didn't know what to do with him. The kid was raised by two gang member parents that were kids themselves. They didn't know how to raise a kid, so how the hell were they going to raise him? And then when he came into the system, all he'd ever been, it came down by the system was harm, oppression, abuse. So he can't trust these people. So when these people continue on that pattern, of course he acted out. Man, this kid was 135, 140 pounds soaking wet. I was watching grown men, 6, 7 deep, pull this kid out, pepper spray him, hog tie him, cuff him, hit him. All he wanted was someone to give him a little structure, a little conversation. And I would see those glimpses when I would watch Mark come in and talk to him every once in a while, ones that maybe had a little more humanity in them. And they just couldn't find it in themselves to be as ugly as the people that worked with them. And the kid would light up, or if someone on the tier would talk to him, the kid would light up. And he was hungry, man, for some love, for some compassion, for someone to just say, man, I fucking care about you. And that's the thing that we don't see when we're looking at how people are treated in these environments. And then I think about, you know, why I bring up Malcolm is because one of the things he told me in one of our final conversations before I was released is I can't wait to get out and kill a fucking cop. I can't wait to get some get back for everything these people have done to me. And I thought, damn, people think this is keeping them safe. Like, this kid is for sure going to get out and harm someone in our community and leave a wake of destruction for his family, for himself, so that for whatever happens, the situation is caused. I know what it feels like to take a life. You live with that forever, no matter how it feels in the moment. And that's what we're breathing. Is that making our society safer? And why, instead of doing this, wouldn't we just give him what we need, or what he needs? Why not give him some love and some structure? Why not give him a little bit of resource and show him that he does that? That it's not his fault he was raised by some kids trying to survive that also were on a bad path because that's all they had. So when I think about being told this makes us safer, this makes our community safer, that's bullshit. This ain't helping nobody. This is a way to continue oppressing and ostracizing us and making sure that people from our community never hold position. And we don't have power. That we can be labeled as criminals, super predators, violent, scary. It's not the right way. It's not the way, and we have to make sure that we tell people this. We can't sit by anymore. Because when we keep doing that, we keep allowing the system to function under our name. And I don't want that in my name. I know that nobody in this room wants that in their name.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, please. I'm going to give it right to you, Dr. Kupers. I just need to tell you that people are going to start to hand you what they call index cards and pens for you to write your questions down on. So if you want to ask a question, please write it down on the card. Dr. Kupers, the floor is yours.
You know, I spend a lot of time trying to figure out why some people are totally destroyed by solitary confinement, and other people accomplish this amazing thing of coming out with their wits about them, with their kindness intact, not being vengeful, like Dorsey and Chris. You know, you didn't hear anything, we didn't hear anything from Dorsey or Chris about this is my fault. I'm in solitary confinement, the worst hole inside the hole, because I messed up. They don't think that way. What they think is that there's something terribly wrong with the system that got me sent here. And I'm going to do something to fix it. They maintain their agency, which is a central part of their integrity. And that's why they survive. Then they study. They read everything. I have some of the sharpest discussions I've ever had about Fanon with prisoners. I go, they've read Fanon, and I say, you've read Fanon, why are you reading Fanon? They say, I read everything. They will not give up their agency. When we look at the hunger strikes at Pelican Bay State Prison, these are people who were, according to the officers on that unit, they were the worst of the worst. That's why they put them on what was called the short corridor. They were punishing them by sticking them on this particularly awful physical place. And what they did is they communicated with each other in spite of the fact that they aren't allowed to communicate. They figured out very creative ways, and they organized the hunger strikes. And they organized an agreement to end hostilities between the gangs and the races in the prisons. That is agency, is an extraordinary accomplishment. Reading Dorsey's book gives you a sense of someone who never gave up his agency and never blamed himself for the awful things that were going on.
Since you said your name last, Dorsey, I'm going to go to you again. This book that Dr. Kupers has mentioned a couple of times recently achieved something sort of phenomenal. It is now officially banned in all California state prisons. But seriously, I wonder if you could talk about then, well, A, why you think, and B, that then means it's contraband, right? That means someone gets caught with your book, that means they can go, that's contraband, they can go home.
Well, that's where we would go when we get caught with George Jackson. And I probably need to say, it wasn't just anybody educating me. I was educated by Black Panther Party, I was educated by the BLA, and I was educated by BGF. That's who educated me. That's who they was throwing in the hole. And you didn't have to get thrown in the hole because you was acting out in regards to behavior. You was thrown in the hole because you was acting out politically. That was the cause for people going to the hole. You know, that was the cause for them walking off multiple decades. They hadn't stabbed anybody. They hadn't actually. My homeboy George just came home after serving 51 years. He had one rule violation. You know, most of y'all done jaywalked at least once in 51 years. You know, Pen Award. I was nominated for In the Margin. I'm nominated for a Northern California Book Award for being creative, nonfiction, and having the best works in 2024. All those peoples I didn't write the book for. I wrote the book for my homies because they may not have a chance to distinguish between regret and remorse. You know, I didn't get to understand that stuff until I had a great-granddaughter. You know, I would always tell the board I regretted participation in this crime before the echo of the gunshot left. I also regretted not getting away. Remorse required a little bit of empathy. It required sympathy. It required a whole series of emotions that's hard to obtain while somebody got their foot on your neck. Or that you muffled up because if somebody attacked you, you want to break them down. So that at a certain point, this book, you don't know me, but I can tell you this. I was with Angela Davis when she was teaching you how to save the prison industrial complex. You don't know me. I was with Michelle Alexander when she was teaching you how to save mass incarceration. You don't know me. I don't do this for money. I do this for cause. So, when somebody is denying me access to the book or denying my homies access to the book, some clown that probably is not as well read as I am. You know, so I know that I've been to prisons to visit people that was in trouble in Auckland, New Zealand. I'd have been to Paulsmore Prison in South Africa. I'd have been to Mariana Prison in El Salvador. I done did organizing not only nationally, not only locally, but internationally. And you don't know me. So, when you read the new Jim Crow, I'm mentioned by name. When they talk about critical resistance, I was on the NNOW committee that helped actually do the first conference that came out with the Organization of Critical Resistance. I got maybe 13 chapters functioning inside of California of All of Us Are None, and probably got other chapters of Wisconsin, Texas. I also created, and it was a co-founder of the formerly incarcerated convicted people's movement, and we're in 25 different states. So at a certain point...
The caller has hung up.
Hey, I'm sorry, brother.
We'll have you when he gets back.
You know, we did an interesting thing in the book, and that is Chris and Juanetta made a list of the reasons people are sent to solitary. And you think it's for attacking an officer or killing somebody, or, you know, it's for crossing a line. It's for talking back. It's for having one of the things that I just could not believe when I heard this, is a prisoner was sent to the hole for having ibuprofen, which was past its date of use. And so that was contraband. So there's just these tiny little questions. I have a question I'd like to ask, if that's okay, of Chris. Chris, are you with us?
Yes.
Oh, there he is.
Okay. Here is a question. The book is a lot about prisoner journalists. We have 36 prisoners writing stories that went into our book, and Chris and Juanetta are prisoner journalists that are widely published. How do you do it, Chris? Is there retaliation when you expose what's going on in the prison?
I mean, how we do it with the village, and we know that because we're taught that forever. it takes a village, and that saying's around for a reason. And it's no different when we're doing this work, right? It takes a lot of people to support our voices, because there's something that happens a lot that we see. People will say, I'm giving a voice to the voiceless. And every time I do that shit, it hurts me to my bones. Because I'm not voiceless. Quebec's not voiceless. And 2 million people in prison aren't voiceless. So I think, why do you gotta get a voice? Even if you mean well, I appreciate that. Sometimes it's not about the intention, it's about the intent. So what it is we have a village of people around us, and we're building that even stronger. We're even going to launch this in 2026 in January, what we're going to call the Narrative Change Lab at What to Justice, to start empowering incarcerated writers, as many as we can across the country. We're going to call and do what I call mini newsrooms in every fucking prison we can. So people can tell the truth, they can tell the reality, and we can humanize how we are here and what we're experiencing each and every day, and that story's not told for us. And that's something that we face a lot when you're doing prison journalism. We'll I've written for the New York Times a bunch of times. When I first started, they wanted to use the word offender. They said, well, we're going to change this in the story. And in the first 2 paragraphs, we need to put that you murdered somebody. I said, I'm writing a piece about how books changed my life, how reading changed my life. Man, we're not about to put that guy's name in there that I took his life and run his name through the ringer. That's not good for his family, and that's not nothing except for telling stories for you. And I'm not going to physical publication for 4 years, and I'll write in one of my other publications that I continue to write for. Maybe my to this. It has to do, and it worked, and I realized that we could push back a little bit, right? But also, like Terry alluded to, is a lot of us face a lot to do this. And I always tell people, they say, where you write from prison? I say, no, I write from beyond any line. I'm stuck and held by my captors. Anything can happen at any time, and it has. All the way from me and my wife being given false PREA investigations by administration that took us 2 years to get out of, all the way to going to the hole, all the way to my mail being thrown away, delayed, me being shipped somewhere else. Anything can happen when you're doing this work. I would never sat in the hole for 9 years. It wasn't because she was powerful. Shit, if anything, violence was being oppressed upon her. Those men were trying to rape her to get a piece of toilet paper. Who's the predator in that? So when I think about these things and how crazy they are, well, we're just trying to speak the truth. One time a superintendent asked me why I write negative stories about the prison during COVID. I said, man, I'm not writing negative stories. I'm just telling people what you're doing. He said, well, I don't appreciate it. Maybe you should write about something positive. I said, shit, maybe you should do something positive.
Thank you, Chris. It's about time. Go ahead, Chris.
Like the first thing that we did with All of Us Nine was we demanded the right to speak in our own voice. That was so fundamental to us. You know, how come y'all describe stuff that how come y'all say second chances as opposed to opportunities? You don't describe your shit as chances. You know, so like at a certain point, when y'all talking to some of us that have been well read, we can hear you in a fundamentally different way. And when I thought about all the stuff that I knew about prisons, I interviewed Ellen Berry. And I was so naive, I thought OBGYN was a prison game. I did. I was listening and saying, a little small ass game. longer on women issues than I did men issues.
And I didn't say it, but for folks who don't know, sexual assault is actually the primary way that women experience state terror, particularly Black women and women of color. I'm getting co-signed by Chris Blackwell. You
get love. There's love. You're speaking truth, and that's something we hide, right? That's something that we're not talking about in society. You know, we don't think about the labor, the intensiveness, the pain, the oppression, the assault that's happening to women. And it's far worse than men. It's just like the invisible labor of women that are tied to prison. Go to a visit room sometime and look around. 95%, 99% women. Moms, grandmas, sisters, girlfriends, wives. Ain't no men in there.
It's about time to take some of these questions, but Dolores, are you here?
Is Dolores here? I don't.
Dolores Canales, are you here?
We have a lot of very special people here, but the one I just want to make a comment if she'd like is Dolores Canales, who is the leader of the California Families Against Solitary Confinement and one of the pioneers and key organizers of the Mandela Bill campaign.
Love you, Dolores. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your work, Dolores. Terry wanted to acknowledge you. And then, and yeah, to make a brief comment, yes.
Thank you very much for all of that. But of course, we're saying, who really knows you? The reason all of this came into play and where I even have some recognition was because 30,000 people incarcerated sacrificed their lives. Okay, so when you look at Dolores, know that there was 30,000 people in prison, thousands in solitary confinement that went days, that went weeks, that went 60 days on the third hunger strike, 3 hunger strikes, historical hunger strikes. Never in the history of California, I don't even get on. Never in the history of California had there been anything like that. And you know what it was? It was the outside organizers that lifted me and embraced me and people that had been doing this work for decades. And that's why Dolores got a platform. Because of the people, half the people that are in this room right now. So please, when you look at me, look at a frickin' army, because that's what we always have to have. That's what it took. So thank you.
Thank you, sister. And then I would be remiss. I mentioned that my entree into this issue was submerging myself into the studies of the Black Liberation Army and doing work against state terror in the name of my ancestors and elders. The first organization that I joined when I moved to Oakland was the Black August Organizing Support Committee under the guidance of abolish and that has led to a whole bunch of different kinds of work and also relationships with folks. And so I just want to acknowledge that Minister King X is in the room of California Prison Focus and the campaign to liberate our elders. All right, and may Baba Shaka rise in power. I really want to ask this question because it's asking about Native American women and Latino women and Black women. I can't all the way read it. And so I'm just wondering, the person that asked this starts with my question is to the wonderful women first. Thank you for talking about girls and juvenile women in U.S. prisons. I would love for you to read your own question because I think it's an important one if you were still here. Yes?
I'm sorry, I just got my hand out of the cast.
That was not meant to be a critique. I just think it's an important question based on the words that are on the card.
You're addressing women in prison. I've been in 3 city jails. I used to be involved with women in prison. And the Native American South I dealt with federal prison years ago. And it was the saddest thing. I had Native American in me. And my friends got part black and white.
elders, women. They look like many of them in the late 60s, 70s. They were so beautiful, the only ones that got to go to that Bible. Many of them were locked in their cells across this country. Native American, thank God for Leonard Curtin that just got out 50 years in prison. The Native American women in this society used to write a woman in Maryland for many, many years. Her name was Reagan. She's from a tribe from Michigan. The last time she wrote me, I called many times to talk to her. She was dying. She talked about her childhood on the reservation. She got everything. When she said, Chris, I'm going to commit suicide. I never heard from her. She was in solitary, raped by the black women and the black men guards and the white men and the white men guards. Full of white men. Native people don't have a voice in the spread of the nation. The first Americans.
Thank you for bringing conversation about our Indigenous relatives into the room. Dorsey, you addressed this, so Chris, I'm going to throw this one to you because you talk about it in your story. The question is, are our incarcerated brothers and sisters allowed books in solitary?
Oh yeah, absolutely. As you can very well see, books like the Dorseys are not allowed, and I'm sure there's a long list of different ones in different states. But yes, they are, and you know it's one of the things that some people can use to get by. Not everybody, as Dr. Kupers very eloquently put it, right? Sometimes it's hard to read when you're guarded without a press. Sometimes it's hard to read when people are banging on the door because they got so much frustration and built up anger that all they can do is kick that steel door and try to get something out. So, but absolutely people can, and it's the one thing we can get people inside.
Thank you, Chris. I'm gonna, this next question, I don't think the person that wrote it knows that it's controversial, but I know it's controversial because I've been talking to Dorsey about this when Governor Newsom first brought this to the table. The question is, we've known for years that education and rehab for prisoners produces recidivism significantly. Why don't we hear more about that? Talk about what San Quentin is doing now and how that is impacting what can be different. What could be different for our incarcerated folks in terms of outcomes? You know, I shot back to the plan that was put on the table to turn San Quentin into an actual rehabilitation center. And, you know, I had some chuckles over that.
You know what? I do got a bucket list. My bucket list is because he thinks he's modeling the Norway solution, I guess it is, or the Norway plan. You know, to the most part, it wasn't until I started traveling, they would have access to weighing out the whole scenario. You know, so what's on my bucket list is to get a group of formerly incarcerated people to go to Norway and actually start interviewing other formerly incarcerated people in Norway to see about what is their activism and what is their state of consciousness. And by the way, I don't think that their education would allow me to read Cornford, dialectical materialism. I don't necessarily think that their education would allow me to get access to Blood in My Eye and the Solidary Brothers. I don't think their education would allow me to read Just Another Nigger. You know, I don't think their education system would allow me to find my own images in the literatures that I was reading. You know, so that right there, some parts of what they're doing is criminal. And by the way, the reason that we name all of us or none, all of us are none, is because we figure like we was trying to build an army. And as long as we are separated, we won't win. So you know, like, cause to be honest, when Angela was talking, I was thinking about it was yesterday or today that they was throwing immigrants in Angola, an old slave plantation. The largest concentration of people that they send into California that's immigrants is in outside of Bakersfield. I think it's in Delano. So at a certain point, these old prisons that we thought we closed down, we should tear it down because they start repurposing it.
It's the only thing that I go ahead.
Can I add to that? We don't need more humane prisons.
That's where I was going.
We don't need the Norwegian model. We don't need the fucking prisoners.
Exactly.
We don't need to harm our people from our community. So how about we quit trying to do what other people are doing and have good prisons, healthy prisons? How about we have healthy communities and healthy societies?
He said we gotta do all roads in because the conditions of our people are so dire. But if we go down a rabbit hole of trying to make oppression pretty, I don't exactly know what conversation we're having.